Hello, world. Welcome to the Breakout Finder podcast. I'm your host, Nate Liss. You can find me on Twitter at an outraged Jew. And with me, as always, is Mr. Ryan Lopes. You can find him on Twitter at stillryan5. And tonight, special guest, first time on the show, Mr. Nick Ercolano. You can find him on Twitter at Nick_BDGE. And your website is bigdogsfantasy.com. Is that correct?
It is correct. Yeah, we stick to mostly video stuff, but we throw a chicken scratch for notes up on bigdogsfantasy.com if for whatever reason people want to check that out.
No, I love the website, man. I mean, on the .com, I think you guys call it a lifestyle brand as well as like fantasy football. And dude, the gear that's on there, I was telling my wife, because with Breakout Finder, we're trying to start the merchandise thing, of course, and it starts out more brand logos in the beginning, but you guys have really expanded to this kind of cool, authentic looks. It's not your usual just put a logo on the chest and call it a day. I saw some pretty slick shit in there. I saw a visor that I thought was a typo. Was there a $170 visor in there? Tell me about this thing.
Yeah, so the visor, I don't know if you're familiar with like how familiar you are with merchandise and apparel and stuff, but we use a drop shipping company. So we don't actually house any merchandise here. There's a manufacturer somewhere, California, or wherever it is, Carolina or something, and you upload the files, and they keep all the sweatshirts and T-shirts and stuff on hand. So your customers buy it through there. They deal with shipping and all that stuff. So we really just create the logo, slap it on. The visor was like a new product that they started offering. We threw it on the site, and honestly, at the beginning, it might have been a typo when we put it up. But I was like with two of my friends, and I was like, "Yeah, I just threw it up for $170," and I was like, "Fuck it, we're gonna run with that and see what happens with it." And we do have one purchase on the visor, actually.
That's
believe
incredible.
It or not. I swear. It's incredible. It's ridiculous. So we have one purchase on it, and then we have multiple reviews from random people that have not even purchased it. There's one guy who was like, gave us a 5-star review on it and was like, "What the fuck is this?" I was like, "I don't know, but thank you for the 5-star review." So yeah,
I gotta know who the one person is that's fucking out in the wilderness right now rocking a $170 BDGE, visor. I hope he has a Twitter or something. I gotta find him.
I know who he is. He doesn't have a Twitter, but he's very active within the Big Dogs community. He's in a bunch of dynasty leagues, and I'm in a dynasty league with him. So apparently the Big Dogs community has some deep pockets, and he was ready to show off the visor. So Vatch, nothing but love for you, baby.
Dude, it was hysterical because I clicked on that and I was reading the reviews. I was like, this dude sold this many visors? And I saw the guy. Didn't somebody give you like 1 star and say it was great? Right? It was So
the reviews were like, the one guy bought it and we knew he bought it. And then all of a sudden there were like other random reviews of people that never bought it. Right. And we were in a group chat, like me and my dynasty league. We're like, "Yo, look at these fucking idiots, like giving us reviews without purchasing it." So the dudes that are like in the dynasty league with me are like, "Fuck this, we're going to go leave reviews too, just to like make fun of it." So now we have like a compiled list of like 6 or 7 reviews from people that have never purchased the item. So it's becoming some sort of like folklore at this point.
Yeah, it's a smash. But dude, in all honesty, I checked out the website. The merchandise is really cool.
Thank you.
And dude, a lot of people that are unfamiliar with you, the video work that you do on YouTube, the interviews and just the stuff that you've done yourself. I think it was like an hour and 20 minutes the other night and watched the how BDGE made $200,000 on YouTube. Dude, really cool to see you like be very transparent and break this stuff down and just be matter of fact about stuff to teach people, hey, just because I made X on this draft guide, you never set your money at the top. You always shoot lower than that, and expectation is this. And so it was pretty cool to see somebody who's been successful out there just really being authentic and transparent with the people. So I mean, is that the type of stuff that you post there, or is it mostly fantasy, or is it a mix?
It's a mix. I just think the way to the industry we're in right now is just so saturated with things that are probably going to become redundant over the next couple of years, right? There's only so much information and stats and analysis you can really give off. So the way I've always looked at it, and maybe it was a subconscious thing at first, but the only thing that's going to separate us over the long run is branding, right? Is building that connection with your audience. And you can really only do that by being authentic and like really being vulnerable. So if I'm out here saying, like I fucked this up, I started vlogging as soon as I left my full-time job like 3 years ago. So these people that have really been invested in my brand have watched me grow up from, being a kid to I'm still a fucking grown child at this point, really. I'm just learning and documenting the process along the way. But if I can inspire kids that were my age, 18, 19, 20 years old, and understand that like the only thing that separates where you are at that point and like the goals that you want to hit is the hard work, man. It's the consistency. We're all, and transparency. I mean, that's what inspires people nowadays, right? It's not like that rah-rah shit yelling at people. Like, no one actually gets inspired by that. You want to see people that overcome these things, that look like you, that feel like you, that, go through the same fucking emotions that you do. And when you see people overcome that stuff, like, that's what it's all about. And it makes you believe in yourself. So I'm really out here just trying to, I guess, inspire the youth, but only not like really inspire them, just show them my journey along the way,
That's fucking dope, man. And stuff like that resonates so closely with myself, and I'm sure Nate will jump in and say the same, because that's kind of been our whole, motto as we've kind of built this thing and you hit on it, man. It's like this industry has grown so much over the past 2 or 3 years alone, where, everyone has, rankings. And of course we still put out rankings and content and written stuff or whatever, but at the same time, end of the day, what separates what you do, what we want to do, what we do, to the next guy or gal is just the personalities, man, and just being authentic, being yourself, having fun, and that Nate and I have said that over and over again, is the moment this shit stops becoming fun is when we walk away. We don't need to do this stuff. So this is so dope to connect with someone like you, man, who has literally built a full-time job out of this stuff, and obviously just out here thriving, man, with $170,000 visors and shit.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The very core focus of the content I put out is definitely fantasy related,
for sure.
And I need to make sure that what I'm delivering on the fantasy side is extremely valuable, and it's information that I could tell when I listen to you guys. Your podcast, like, it's very well researched. You guys come out here with stats and stuff that you're not going to find elsewhere, and you could just tell the preparation. The people that I think prepare the most are the ones that come off as if they don't prepare. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about a lot of things, and you could tell when you listen to you guys, like, how well you prepare for this stuff. And that's so essential, man. Like, people, the lifestyle stuff is kind of a background thing for me, because I know not everybody's going to be like, oh, I like his fantasy stuff, like, let me check who he is as a person, right? But if I can bring along like a 10th, a 15th, a 20th of the audience, like, you're going to build such a deep connection with those people that relate to you as a person. So I think it's like a lot of people look at content nowadays as like, fantasy football and this kind of like lifestyle off-brand stuff as like secondary. But I really echo loudly that needs to be like a key piece of your actual pillar of content, man. I think really long run, that's what's going to separate people.
That's something, man, where Matt Kelly has been so successful, because that guy,
so good.
His presence, his aura, his personality is gigantic, and his analysis is creative. I mean, we've all done podcasts with him, and the way his brain works is unlike anybody else's. He can turn a corner so fast on a topic. He can create a narrative instantaneously. But what keeps people coming back is the fact that he can do those things, and he is personable, and he is boisterous and loud. And so, like, for us on this show, man, we do try to be different. But to the point that you made, like, there are a lot of shows, man, that are exactly the fucking same. It's the same show with the same characters. And, like on Patreon, I know you have a Patreon, and it's like on Patreon, dude, if you get too static, sometimes even if your analysis is good, people are like, nah, I'm all right. Because it's just so much static fucking wall of numbers coming at them. But if you hit them with that personality and you give them a piece of you, and like you said, you're vulnerable, and they get that inside look, like I'm on there talking about me fucking up something on the grill barbecuing, and like they get a little bit of that personality in there, and it's like now they're kind of tied to what's going on with you emotionally, and they're on that ride. And then all you have to do at that point is exceed expectations of what people are paying into it, right? So if you're charging $6 a month, just blow them away for $6 a month and tie in that sort of emotional tether, and it shit's a success. But like, I see your stuff on your website, your YouTube, and the fantasy football stuff is fantastic. But I found myself as a fantasy football analyst clicking all the other shit. I was watching all the other videos about all the other stuff, because to me, that's the stuff that A, resonates, and B, I don't find elsewhere. Like, you are successful. So it's cool to see somebody out there doing that kind of shit. I know Matt is very fantasy football focused. He did his thing with you, which was dope, because nobody ever gets that out of Matt. I mean, I talked to him a lot off air, so I know a lot of this, but like, for the people that don't know, like, that little look inside is amazing. And so again, I think what you're doing over there, that lifestyle brand, like you said, man, when this shit hits the fan and we've got 100,000 fucking analysts out there, dude, people are going to look to you for being creative, for having this brand and doing something unique additionally. And man, I just don't see it going backwards. And I mean, you've seen your numbers, right? You just continue to trend upward. As long as you keep showing up, it just grows.
Yeah, man, just work hard, stay consistent, keep innovating. Like, just at the end of the day, I think people look at business as like such a numbers game. I'm just like, dude, just do what feels right. If you have good intentions and you work really hard towards those intentions and you're passionate about it, like, good things are going to come from it. Like, no doubt about it.
And did you even, like, for me personally, what I got on fantasy Twitter to like read analysts, what they were saying, like, I never thought I was going to be doing a podcast. I never thought I was going to write, make an app, work with Ryan. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know if you had intentions of doing what you're doing, but it's funny to have sort of stumbled into these situations, because I have people all the time that go, how do I get started podcasting? How do I get started writing? And it's like, that when you start a podcast, you're probably going to have 5-10 listeners. When you write an article, depending on what distribution you're sending it to, you might have 50 readers, you might have 25 readers, but it's like that consistency, that grind. And as long as you've got good intentions, like you said, and to Ryan's point, like, if you're having fun doing it, just keep fucking doing it. And eventually this turns into something.
Yeah, that's why, that's a lot about the series that I had on with Matt coming on and a lot of the other analysts and whatnot. It was trying to open the eyes of people who come in. Like, our industry is so innocent in the sense that everyone that comes in is so passion based, right? Like, people don't really look at it from a money perspective. But when you're trying, when things start getting saturated, you have to start looking at it from a marketing perspective if you want to separate yourself. At first, it didn't take that hard of work, but there are so many people that do so much research now that, like, that's not going to cut it. You could be the best at the research, man. There are so many guys on Twitter that, like, do crazy research that might be like the unlock to fantasy football that we'll never know about, right? There might be like some statistic we're never going to know about because he can't communicate, man. At the end of the day, like, if you can't communicate, like, you got to figure out which way to do that. And that's why, like, you got to be a marketer or a business person first and a fantasy analyst second is the way I look at it, man.
Yeah. No, it's great, man. And I'm that's why I'm happy to have you on this show tonight. And I'm glad we could talk about this. I know you and I have talked a little bit off air about some of the intricacies of what it takes to create a show like this and a podcast and the gear and all that shit. And there's a lot more work that goes into this than people think. It's a fucking pain in the ass, for sure. Like a super duper pain in the ass. And speaking of pain in the ass, I made an overlay for this show, Nick, and I used your avatar. And I got to be honest, I told Ryan this, dude, I cut out your frame wearing the overalls, and I had to shave your biceps down because I'll be damned if anybody comes on this show and shows me up on my own goddamn podcast with guns like that. Ryan said he thinks it's a body double or it was a head swap. Is that true? No,
that was my peak fitness days. I think that was, maybe I was a little bit tanner. You know how it is. It's good lighting, man. Yeah. It's always good lighting when it comes to the pictures. I promise that was me. My friend had a smoking meats and clapping cheeks party. That was the theme of the party.
What, bro? Time out. You smoked meats. What is the? Do we dive into what the clapping cheeks portion of said barbecue was?
Well, what's the demographic of your show?
I don't know, like 26 to 38.
Nah, it's just a phrase that the young kids say nowadays. Clapping cheeks, getting the nut wet, whatever you want to dive into. It was just a funny theme, yeah. So the theme was you had to wear overalls to the party. I happen to be in very good shape. The picture came out fantastic, and I will rock that till the day I die.
Awesome, man. This might be the day you die, actually, because I'm looking at the show sheet, Nick, and Ryan wrote it, and right at the top. Now,
I had to give it at the top. I had to put it at the top.
Right at the top. Now, Nick, I'm going to let you start, and you can lay your case out. And
sure.
Because you've been open on Twitter. You have been vocal, and you have said that I think I don't know in exact words, but you think Leonard Fournette stinks. Is this correct?
I don't understand how you could look at it in a different angle.
I want to just jump in real quick before I let you two go back and forth here. I believe one of the very first interactions on this subject matter that I seen you two gents partake in, a couple few tweets back and forth. Nate, I want to say Nick jumped back at you, and I want to say he might have said something along the lines of, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but it was something along the lines of "Bring it, old man." I think is how that ended. And I dropped my phone. I said, "Man, this is gonna be something." And I totally forgot about the little back and forth until Nick was so nice enough to drop a certain GIF inside the DM group today, and I said, "Holy shit, this is gonna be a fun ass show." Yeah. And here we are.
I actually think me and Nate started beefing about Leonard Fournette like before we even like followed each other. I think like I don't know if I had been following you because I listened to all Matt's podcasts and I started following you a while ago from them, and then I was like fucking chirping in the mention sections, and I became one of the guys who you were just yelling at, but I don't think you knew who I was at that time. So our Leonard Fournette beef actually goes further back than most people know.
I'll have to dig this up. Yeah, there was a lot of people chirping, so admittedly you were lost in the shuffle, but Nick, this is it right here. This is the stage. Please.
Moment of truth.
Okay, so the way I look at Leonard Fournette is most of the cases have been out there, and you're not going to hear a new argument from most people. The efficiency metrics across the board, any kind of running back metric that you could pull out about Leonard Fournette last year were miserable, right? Yards created, juke rate, wherever you want to pull him from, PFF, player profiler, pull them all across the board. He was bad on the ground. And the part of this that kind of frustrates me that people don't look at is for as much shit as we give NFL head coaches and offensive coordinators, they do adapt year over year, right? When a guy gets 300, 350 touches, opportunities, and he's extremely inefficient with it, they tend not to continue to feed someone the ball who's getting, 3.6, 4.2, whatever it is, yards per carry over and over and over and over and over again, right? Like Fournette saw 100 targets last year, right? That's the big buzzword right here. 100 targets, 100 targets, 100 targets, right? And he somehow took those 100 targets, finished outside the top 10 in points per game for half PPR, right? I always play half PPR, and that's what I look at it. So for someone to see 100 targets, finish outside of the top 10 in fantasy tells me you have to have been awful. And everyone wants to talk about this unlucky touchdown rate, right? Oh, he's going to turn that around. Why is he going to turn that around, though? He's not elusive. He doesn't make guys miss. His offensive line is terrible. Gardner Minshew, fun quarterback. We all want to see him succeed, but at the best case scenario, he's unreliable and fun at the peak, right? The biggest issue, though, of course, is Jay Gruden coming in and bringing Chris Thompson along with him. So those 100 targets are going to creep down. I know. Chris Thompson is his percentage of likeliness to get hurt is probably floating around 120%. But when you look at Jay Gruden, when you look at what Jay Gruden has done in his history, you go back all the way to like the Cincinnati Bengals, 2011, 2012, 2013, and then the Redskins since then. Look at the running backs. It has been like a plethora of guys. It's Cedric Benson, it's Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, it's Matt Kelly, it's Rob Kelly, it's Matt Jones, it's Alfred Morris. All of them have been like subpar efficiency, but all of the guys who have led their team in carries, all of them who have been, as I say, anyone over like 220 pounds, I just call a fat running back. All of the fat running backs get a bunch of carries, never lead the team in targets. It's going to be Chris Thompson. Every one of those guys gets around like 25 targets for the year. I think Gruden comes in and he knows Fournette. Okay, here's my case in point. I stand with Leonard Fournette where the Jacksonville Jaguars stand with him. They don't want him.
Wow. This is like a rap battle, and that was just the first round. Well, I got to go ahead and clean up some of what was said in there because I think that there was some incorrect stats. And I want to start out by saying that Football Outsiders, which is a great website, they rank the offensive lines. And as you mentioned, the Jacksonville Jaguars ranked number 27th in the league in adjusted line yards per carry, 3.88. Okay, so that's last year. So we know the line stinks. Leonard Fournette saw the fourth most extra defenders in the box in 2019 per carry. So shitty O-line and a bunch of defenders in the box every time, 7.1 defenders in the box per carry. So he was number 8 in yards created in 2019 at the running back position with 478. He was number 8 in breakaway runs, which are carries over 15 yards.
Is that pure volume? Is that pure volume or efficiency? Like, is that per carry yards created, or is that overall?
That's overall.
So my argument is that he was so inefficient that there's no way he's getting those volume numbers again.
So hold on. So he was number 44 in yards created per touch. So I'll give you that. So, but let's go down because I'm glad you brought up Chris Thompson. So he was targeted 100 times in 15 games, 6.67 targets per game in 2019. He clearly absorbed the TJ Yeldon targets. But to your point, we have a change in the OC here. He was number 7 in total running back fantasy points in those 15 games while only scoring 3 touchdowns. You brought this up. But the fact is that of the top 7 running backs from 2019, only Austin Eckler had as few touchdowns. Every other rusher had 9 or more touchdowns than Leonard Fournette last year. That's 54 extra points. So to say that Leonard Fournette won't see more than 3 rushing touchdowns is crazy. We all know he will. They added no running back of consequence except Chris Thompson, as you brought up. Chris Thompson is almost 30. He's often injured. The last time he was on the field, he had a lower catch rate than Leonard Fournette. Look it up. Chris Thompson also averages 1/3 the yards created per touch of Leonard Fournette. He averages 0.44. Leonard Fournette averages 1.4. So as bad as Fournette is, Chris Thompson is unbelievably worse. And there's plenty of room for target share with the addition of Shenault because Dede saw 100. There can be some regression of those targets. Chris Conley and Keelan Cole combined for 125. So even if we see Leonard Fournette scaled back to 70 targets, he's still right up there in the top 10 if the touchdowns come up. And I love Leonard Fournette in 2020. So if your argument is that Leonard Fournette stinks going forward beyond Jacksonville, then we might have a case. But in 2020 with volume on his side, I find it hard to believe that Leonard Fournette finishes outside the top 10, but there were some guys that finished just outside of it last year that we expect to get a bump this year. So that would be the only change for me.
So the first tweet, I remember what it was. It was when you ranked Leonard Fournette inside the top 5 for your dynasty running back rankings.
Yes.
And that's where I came at you and I named like 13 players that I would rank above him, and I still stand by that statement. My problem with Leonard Fournette is, like, I mean, you could throw all these, you know, like yards per touch numbers about Chris Thompson in there. Jay Gruden's not looking at those numbers. If he wants to pass, like, you can't sit here and say that Leonard Fournette's catch rate being better than Chris Thompson means that Jay Gruden is going to be like, you know what, let's use Leonard Fournette in those passing situations. I also think the two receivers that you brought up, Keelan Cole, Chris Conley, they're not the type of guys that take the targets away from the line of scrimmage that Leonard Fournette sees the dump offs on. I think Laviska Shenault is another negative to Leonard Fournette's game because he is a good deep threat, but he does play around the line of scrimmage a lot. So I think a lot of those maybe dump offs could be designed plays to a guy like Laviska Shenault. So I think, I mean, listen, the volume could be there. That is like the one argument that's against me in the fact that they didn't add a running back of consequence. But I'm of the belief that you don't keep beating the same drum if it's a negative to your team. Like, that's how bad teams stay bad, by giving Leonard Fournette 350 carries, ending up as a 6-10 team, and then doing it all again the next time. I think Jay Gruden is a good offensive coordinator. I think he got a shitty break you see a lot of head coaches perform poorly as head coaches because they have to worry about the whole team dynamic. They have to lead a bunch of men in a locker room. When they go back to drawing the X's and O's, they can do what they do best. And it goes back to Jacksonville, man. Like, they didn't want Fournette. They were trying to shop him. Like, if they see any sliver of room, like Leonard Fournette, what happens? This is a huge fucking reach, obviously, but I'm just saying in the general sense of things, there's going to be a lot of players that come into training camp completely out of shape. I was seeing tweets from guys like physical trainers that work with some of the top athletes in the game right now saying that there were like people passing out and fainting on like the first couple of days of workouts because they're not staying in shape at home. And if we see that kind of shit coming in, like, that will open up, if there are any sort of running back by committee, even like question marks in any of the NFL backfields, which Fournette clearly is not a favorite of the team, this is going to shorten that leash a little bit. And who knows, what if Fournette stops getting 20 carries a game? That dips down to like 16. His target numbers go from like 5 to 3. All of a sudden, you're looking at a guy who's giving you like 9, 10 fantasy points a game. Sure, he might end up with like 6 rushing touchdowns on the end of the year. Of course, he's going to get more than 3 if he gets anywhere near the same amount of volume. I just think he's going to be a guy that you're going to regret taking in the early rounds of drafts.
I think there's a lot of speculation being thrown down right now because there is no real way to predict what happens with Leonard Fournette. We know with certainty that this O-line was dog shit. And we know that Leonard Fournette did his best behind this O-line. I mean, he hasn't had a spectacular O-line since he's been in the league. He's never had a top 8, top 10 O-line. He hasn't been blessed like some of these other rushers in the league that are running behind these fucking gaping holes all over the place. And to your point, I agree. Laviska Shenault is definitely more of a around the line of scrimmage type player. And I think that does cost him some targets. And I think if you look back at 2018 and you look at the target share with TJ Yeldon, that would allude to the idea that maybe there's going to be this sort of split where we see a lot more target share go to Chris Thompson. He could be a guy that sees around 50 targets, which necessarily means that Leonard Fournette may drop into that 40, 50 target range, kind of in that Mark Ingram level. And that would hurt because that's really what kept Leonard Fournette propped up last year because the touchdowns weren't there. But that's truly yet to be determined at this point. But if we're looking at post-analysis with Jay Gruden and we're looking at those numbers and we're making assumptions, then I think there is a fear that Leonard Fournette would get scaled back a little bit. But Leonard Fournette's also playing for future contracts this year. And I think that's going to be a motivator. To your point, you brought up the fact that what if he's out of shape? I've seen the picture of him. He looked fat as fuck to me. I'm not really sure if he is in shape. But
I haven't even seen the picture, but that's music to my fucking
I know,
ears,
right? Like that. Just put that feather in your cap. You can use that when you rebuttal. So, but to my point, I think that Leonard Fournette is still relatively young. This is a guy that came into the league with an insane fucking speed score. I mean, speed score has been like blown in my face by Matt Kelly with a blowtorch talking about Jonathan Taylor. Like literally like torch the fuck out of me. That's the only metric he's ever used. I beat him up for like an hour saying he used no numbers. That's the only one he used. Leonard Fournette, 96th percentile. I mean, so he is an athletic player. He is bursty, but it just hasn't been favorable in Jacksonville. And fuck, we give Allen Robinson all this courtesy of bad quarterback play, and admittedly he's been great. Leonard Fournette has no apologists out there. There are fucking nobody.
But why do you assume it's going to get better this year if his O-line is still shit?
I think that there's continuity going into this year. I think they added weapons on the outside that hopefully relieve some of that pressure that's in the middle of the field. I mean, all they had was D.D. Westbrook, DJ Chark, which nobody expected to play on the level he did. Nobody behind him, a shit O-line, and they fucking Gardner Minshew stepped in and they're like, well, I guess this is our quarterback. They didn't even know that he was going to be okay. I mean, he's not great. He's certainly not the answer in Jacksonville. So I think that it's hard to say, but my belief is that I've always been of the belief that it has to be better than it was last year.
I just look at Jay Gruden and like you go back to his history and he's never really rode one horse. He really hasn't. If he did give one guy all the carries, it was never repeated the same next year. If the guy was inefficient, it was never the same guy next year. And if the guy was getting the leading carries, like he was also not the guy getting the targets. So he's always had like a pass catching and a running back.
Let me ask you this question then, because Matt Kelly tries to mull me over with this. He says that bringing up coach corollary is bullshit. That using that analysis, because I brought up Andy Reid, and I brought up the Chiefs, and I brought up how they use the running backs in the passing game. And he's basically said that that's a bullshit way to construct an argument, and that's essentially what you're doing right now. So what side of the line are you on with that?
I'm definitely more on your side when it comes to the coaching thing, but this is more of like a new coach coming in, and you don't know how he's going to treat it. It's not so much like, you know, if Leonard Fournette was always the guy under Jay Gruden, then I would have no concerns going into this year for his volume. But we do have a new coaching staff, and we've seen what he's done, you know, in previous years. So yeah, I'm definitely on your side when it comes to the whole coaching thing. But I'm not like Jay Gruden is the only reason why Fournette is. It's more so like he's got so much volume, was inefficient, and I think Jay Gruden is an above-average coach that will change things as it needs to be changed.
But didn't Jay Gruden have like Samaje Perine and old Adrian Peterson and Robert Kelly? I mean, are these guys Leonard Fournette?
All fat backs.
Oh, come on, man. So now they're all just fat backs. Unbelievable. What?
No. It's definitely a real point. None of these backs have been as talented, at least on paper, as Leonard Fournette, but they're all around the same efficiency as Fournette. So if they're going to step in, all average 3.8 yards. I know he was at 4.3 last year, but he was like 3.8 the year before, 3.6 the year before that. I just think, you know, clearly the team said that they don't really want him that much. So if they were willing to give him up for a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, then they clearly had some kind of other plans in their future of another back on the team that they trusted, or maybe they were going to look for another. I don't know what it is, but there's just so much. Obviously, like you said, it's speculation, but there's just so much around it that, like, if they don't like him, I see no reason for me to like him.
With Carlos Hyde out there and some of these other running backs, if they really don't like Leonard Fournette, why not put actual competition behind him? That's kind of my thing. And the thing is, they're not going to re-sign him. We already know that. So maybe they don't give a fuck. They're just going to run him into the ground because they know that Leonard Fournette has to play well if he wants to have a contract elsewhere beyond this. So maybe they don't have to do anything. They just know they have a motivated runner. I don't know.
Yeah. The whole like contract thing, I'm curious to get your guys' takes on this. The whole like one contract year thing, I don't know if anyone's done a study on it, but I don't buy into the whole like he's on a contract year, he's going to perform better. Running into the ground, like I get that you'd like a team would kill a guy and they don't care about it because they're not on contract next year. But if the guy is not good, they're not going to keep trotting him out there just for the sake of being like, we're not going to injure his backup because he's not going to be on the team next year. So like I'll throw it back to you guys. Like, what do you really buy into the whole contract scenario thing?
I think in the case of Fournette specifically, hey guy, I'm very excited to be on the show as well. By the way, I'm stoked to be. Yeah, Nick, how's it going? I think in the case of Fournette, I don't chime in a lot because I am far on the other side of my friend Nate, so I don't want to pile on to the shitstorm that he tends to take on a weekly or bi-weekly basis when we have people come on the show and just trash Fournette. So I am admittedly a bit biased myself, but I think in the case of Fournette, there's probably a good narrative to spin where, he knowing that he, fell out of favor with the front office, with the coaching staff, knowing that he's not coming back. Why would he overexert himself to, possibly jeopardize his future with an injury, whatever the case may be, and kind of just take take it easy this season, and just,
So you're on the side that, so you're like not like he's going to work so hard because it's his contract here. You think he might even pull back?
I'm thinking that he kind of preserves himself, his mental health, his physical health, whatever it is, and he kind of just chills. He does the bare minimum. He has a couple cool runs, whatever like that. But he's not going out there like, man, maybe if I really perform well, I'm gonna get that contract. I think he's done with Jacksonville, man. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, so he'll rank 50th in yards created per attempt instead of 44th. Is basically what you're saying.
So now we got two of you guys. Here's the thing, though.
I think Fournette stinks, man. I'll be very straight.
He had a 69-yard run in a game and ended the game with 66 yards.
It's crazy to me that this guy is getting no credit for the fact that his offensive line is so bad. His quarterback.
Why would he get credit for that?
I'm just saying. Why we apologize for so many other players. Leonard Fournette gets fucking no apology. None. No credit. Zero credit. It's like everybody wanted him to stink from the start. Really. Everybody wanted him to stink from the start. He went to Jacksonville. He's working out of a fucking hole from the beginning. But the fact is, nobody brought up the fact that it's incredibly impressive that like this target share went up as much as it did. I think that they really did go get these targets and expand this offense because the idea of having to target Leonard Fournette this much when arguably he is not a super dynamic receiver. We all know that. But he can be used in the passing game. And 100 targets in 15 games is ridiculous. So I think he's still utilized in the passing game, not to the extent we saw here, and I've stood by that before. I think the touchdowns come up. Here's my question to you. Two questions, Nick. First question. Is Leonard Fournette on Jacksonville past the trade deadline?
Yes. I don't think any team's going to trade for him. Yeah, no. I think he remains on Jacksonville. I think, like, he'll get, if worst case scenario for him, his career, he just gets phased out of the offense.
Okay, next question. Targets on the year. 60 targets, over, under?
Under.
50 targets.
That's about where I think Vegas would be nice and sweet there and cut their losses with the juice or whatever. So I'll go... Fuck it, I'm going to run under. I'm just going to throw him under the fucking truck.
I love it, man.
Oh, my God. That. All right, that's fine. I mean, we will agree to disagree. I feel like, Ryan, if you're keeping track right now, I feel like I won that. So, okay, I mean, that's not the only debate that I've had this year, and I really do hope that this next question leads us into mutual ground because I don't want to do this again. So there's been a fight about two rookies all offseason since the NFL draft. We've got Jonathan Taylor, who is the golden boy of this draft class, and many people say is a generational talent, the best running back since Saquon Barkley, is what I hear often. And then there's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who came from this historic LSU offense that many people had ranked outside the top 5 prior to landing in Kansas City, which many people believe is honestly the best possible fit for a guy like him we could have ever dreamt up. So the question is, where do you stand on Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Are you calling Clyde Edwards-Helaire all hype? Do you think Jonathan Taylor is not as good as he's getting credit for, Nick? Give me your thoughts here.
I think the episode that you and Matt did, just fucking trading haymakers, was one I can't believe we used like 75 minutes listening to it, but it was honestly one of the most enjoyable shows that you guys have done. I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed that shit. It was good. It was informational. I have Clyde over Jonathan Taylor. I will take Clyde over Jonathan Taylor. My problem with the whole fucking argument, here's the thing. In fantasy football, like, we're all going to get a lot of shit wrong, right? We 100%. Are all going to get a lot of shit wrong. Going into the year, I know that, and I always diversify my teams. If I'm in 5 or 6 leagues, I'll draft guys that I hate, and I will fade guys that I love in some leagues, just so not everyone goes down with the ship. With this argument, what makes me so angry is that if someone likes Jonathan Taylor, they can't simply like Jonathan Taylor. It has to be that there's no possible way Clyde Edwards-Helaire can possibly be the 101. Here's what I've done. I had the 101 in one pick in one draft. I think the smartest thing you could do is, I think almost everyone agrees that they're in the same tier, right? The consensus is that it's 101, 102. You can't really decide. The best thing to do if you have the 101 is to move back move back from 101 to 102, pick up like the 210 or the 211 or the fucking 301 or something like that. Get the guy in the back of the two-man tier here. I'll take Clyde. I think the way people are looking at this is as if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was like their 3rd-round pick, and he just happened to settle into Kansas City, and they're like, oh, you just like him for the landing spot. It's like, of course we fucking love him for the landing spot, but he was also the first running back off the board. And like I was looking at numbers for first-round running backs over the last 10 years, and like the lowest touch total for that rookie season, it was like Mark Ingram back in 2012 when he was sharing the backfield with like peak Darren Sproles and Pierre Thomas who were catching balls. But besides him, it's like a minimum of 18 and a half, 19 touches in that first year as a first round running back. If you're the first one off the board, you're getting those touches. And what's crazy is just like he's got such a floor baked in playing behind Mahomes. I was looking at stats and like since Mahomes has taken over as the quarterback in Kansas City, in the games he has started, running backs in KC have averaged 1.75 touchdowns per game. So if you're stepping on the field with KC, like the running backs are putting up almost 2 touchdowns a game. I don't care if you're splitting work with Damian Williams. He's probably going to score double-digit touchdowns as a floor. And I would more so be surprised if Jonathan Taylor did that without an injury to Marlon Mack this year. So I'm on Clyde because I think people are just saying he's good because of the Kansas City thing. He's talented. He was the first running back off the board. He's going to catch passes. He's going to score touchdowns. Like I think you're like trying too hard if you only think is Jonathan Taylor and don't look at any other perspective.
Absolutely. I'm gonna hedge just a little bit, and people fucking hate when you do this, but this is just the fucking reality of it, man. Like I totally understand where Matt Kelly's coming from with the situation thing, and this goes back to even as recent as someone like AJ Brown, who hand up, admittedly I more or less faded because the Tennessee spot was so atrocious. But end of the day, guess what? You're talented, you can ball. And that's all that matters. So talent should trump pretty much just about everything, as Nick kind of alluded to, as all of us agree, landing spot, which is why all these rankings come out post-draft. These landing spot matters. So for us to completely ignore that, so again, I understand what Matt's saying to an extent, but for us to completely fade landing spot, to me, seems egregious. And it seems even more egregious when that landing spot, again, is with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And we can get even more narrative-y here when guys like Veach come out, Andy Reid, when they talk up, and it goes back to what Nick was saying earlier, we make fun of these coaches, these front offices, these staff, all of us can coach better. Everyone knows that, whatever. But when guys like Reid and Nate's done a fantastic job of running out all the fucking historic numbers against Matt, so I'm not going to rehash those, but when someone has the coaching resume with running backs, the success with running backs that Andy Reid does and has had, coupled with the fact that this front office is saying, Patrick Mahomes made the pick. Patrick Mahomes and called said, I want this guy. Andy Reid said, this is better than Brian Westbrook. Like,
dude,
these
it's like
things.
They asked Joe Burrow. It's like,
Sure.
Who's the best player you've ever played with? Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Patrick Mahomes. Who do you want? Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Veach says Veach says to Reid, go look at his tape. Looks like Brian Westbrook. Like, where there's smoke, there's fucking fire.
Man, and this goes back to like shit doesn't have to be hard, and kind of what Nick was alluding to. Like, we don't have to this debate just to debate, or we don't have to try hard to just to fade. Like, when again, so I understand what Kelly's saying, but at the same time, when guys like Mahomes are making the call, when there's comparisons to better Brian Westbrook's, like that stuff should resonate with fantasy gamers. Like that, like you should be fucking taking a notepad and writing this shit down. Like, and that stuff should move the needle for you. And if it doesn't, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your team a disservice. So Nate, man, good for you throwing on the cape, man. Just hopping in the ring for 7-8 rounds, whatever it was, because I think I'm right there with you, boys. I don't think it's close, and I love Jonathan Taylor. Nate and I went out on, early on, we were touting Jonathan Taylor. It was easy to see, obviously super easy to see after the combine. But man, you play with a 24-year-old Patrick Mahomes, and you're tied to Andy Reid for the foreseeable future. No fucking brainer.
His entire rookie contract, he's going to be behind Mahomes. I mean, like, what is his floor? It's a ridiculous floor.
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
It's super high. I brought this up on a Patreon podcast that I did, patreon.com/I'm outraged. And I talked about the Indianapolis Colts not prioritizing Jonathan Taylor as a skill position player, right? Day 2, who do they take? Right out of the gate, Michael Pittman at 202. Yep. And guess what? You had Detroit New England, and Miami, all in front of the Colts with their next pick. All three of those teams you could argue needed a running back. A lot of us thought Miami was going to take a running back. Detroit went DeAndre Swift. Lucky for them if Jonathan Taylor was his generational back. New England takes a safety, and fucking Miami goes with an offensive guard. And suddenly the Colts trade up 3 spots. It's not like they were fucking sitting on a fastball and took him at 202. No, they traded up.
Like they told you. They told you who they valued more in their offense, and they told you by that draft pick. And it's like we talk about Jonathan Taylor, and yes, by every like production and athletic measurement, he's a generational talent.
Special player.
But like when you look at the other generational talents that are running backs, it's the Saquons getting picked at one. The NFL knows that they're generational talents. There was something off with Taylor that the NFL said, no, he's not a generational talent. You know what I mean? And maybe we're wrong. Maybe we look back and we're like, wow, this was the easiest fucking pick of all time. But like I think there's more to it when the entire NFL is telling you, no, they're not Saquon Barkley. You're not even Ezekiel Elliott. You're not even trash Leonard Fournette.
He's not. I mean, Jesus. Well, I'm glad you brought up Leonard Fournette because here's the thing. Everybody.
Let's go back to Leonard Fournette real quick.
Everybody's talking about his target share, this final season target share that he had. But the fact of the matter is, Leonard Fournette had a lot of target share, and nobody thinks he's a good pass catcher. So I don't really see what the difference is at the NFL level. But Evan Silva had the most fucking poignant tweet after the shit went down. I want to read this tweet because this is dead nuts, exactly how I feel. He says, especially due to his questionable passing acumen, the Colts' move up for Taylor should be eliciting some criticism. But Taylor is very likely to prove a success as a talented rusher behind one of the league's best offensive lines, and hindsight will consider him a success. And that's true, right? He's going to be fucking fantastic behind there, and he ended up in a great spot, opposite of my argument of Leonard Fournette landing in Jacksonville. I mean, this is always the argument I have on all these podcasts with Matt and other people. They go, oh yeah, this guy's a great rusher. What if he was playing in LSU running behind that offensive line? How much better would he have been? What if Clyde Edwards-Helaire was stuck behind X shit line at this school? How good would he have been then? Well, we don't fucking know because he ended up in a good spot.
Yeah.
And guess what? Quentin Nelson's in front of fucking Jonathan Taylor. And now we have to listen. Everybody talk about Jonathan Taylor averaging 5.9 fucking yards per carry. Means that he's the greatest rusher of all time, even though he's only going to average 1.8 fucking targets a game and probably catch half those balls and end his season with 37 catches because Nyheim Hines is signed through 2021. But that's fine. We don't care. Nobody cares. But the reality is when you look at these two players this next season, the Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be the guy that takes over the backfield before Jonathan Taylor because we know Marlon Mack is good. Last year, number 10 in yards created, number 3 in breakaway runs, number 15 in evaded tackles, number 11 in juke rate, blah, blah, blah. We fucking know he's good. He's great, and he's a better pass catcher than Jonathan Taylor. And Nyheim Hines, for 2 straight years, has been the fucking siphon in that offense of the passing game. And now you have Phillip Rivers.
I think we're going to actually see Mac shift away from that running role and probably start to move towards a little bit more of a satellite back role, like the Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman kind of dichotomy where Freeman out of nowhere is getting 45 targets on the year. I think we could see something similar like that with Mac. I mean, there's no fucking denying that Taylor is, like, you want to talk about pure like athlete. You want to talk about pure prospect. Like, of course, it's Jonathan Taylor over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but like there are so many different things that go into the equation, man. You can't just look at talent. I mean, if we want to talk about just pure talent, like you have to. I started looking at fantasy players as like 4 or 5 different like talent aspects, right? Like there's raw talent. That's one part of the talent. There's durability. That's another part of the talent. There's all these different like equations to it, and people that get too simple with it, I think, they don't see the other angles that are just kind of screaming at their face when it comes to Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
And then, we had Scott Barrett and save me here, Ryan.
Graham
Barfield. And these two guys are the biggest Clyde Edwards-Helaire truthers. And I appreciate it because they're coming from an objective point of view. When you look at last year's top 10 running backs, you know what fucking running back is in there that would shock the world if they didn't know anything else about him? Fucking Austin Eckler. How did he end up in there? Austin Eckler is in there because of the target share. And as Scott Barrett has said multiple times, a target is worth 2.83 times a carry. And it's worth even more if it turns into a catch. So the fact that Clyde Edwards could see 70 targets out of the gate and could see 100 targets in a given season, when many of us believe that Jonathan Taylor's real ceiling, and I asked Matt Kelly this. I said, Matt, if Jonathan Taylor had a Nick Chubb season, do you think that's his ceiling? And Nick Chubb had almost 300 carries, almost 1,500 yards, 49 targets. He goes, Nate, that's his floor. What the fuck? How's that his floor? That's like an epic season, right?
I was gonna say, I hear the JT to Nick Chubb comparisons like all the time. I'm like, let's be honest here. No one was ecstatic about having Nick Chubb on there. He was not a league winner last year. He was and dazzled your team, right? And he's in his second year now. And like, if Jonathan Taylor gets there, yes, he's a top 10 fantasy running back. But the way people are acting as if he is the next elite running back, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it's like he could be Nick Chubb, and like that could be it. You know, he could be in an offense where someone else is catching 50 passes a year and he just gets subjected to 20 receptions. And, you know, the outlier here is if you're going to catch 20, 25 passes, you better put up 1,600, 1,700 rushing yards or you're not going to be a top 3 fantasy running back, you know?
Yeah, I mean, year over year, I think the past 2 seasons, I think Graham had brought this up last year. I think 8 of the top 10 wide receivers had over 60 targets. And then the year before that, I think it was 9 out of the top 10 had over 60 targets. So you got to get passes. You have to be targeted in the backfield. And that's what saved Leonard Fournette last year. That's what turned Austin Eckler into a god. And that's what's going to make Clyde Edwards-Helaire a fucking smash for the entirety of his rookie contract in KC. And it's not close. I don't think it's close at all.
I'm with you, man. Let's ride with Clyde, baby.
Wow, thank God. Okay, Brian, this is a great question. Let's talk about Carson Wentz for a minute, because Carson Wentz is there. There's a scale, and he's all over it for most fantasy owners. I actually just started a couple patron leagues. There's 16-team leagues, 24 rounds. By like the fucking 14th round, Alan Lazard is like the best guy available.
That's aggressive, bro. 16 rounds?
This is 24 rounds, 16 teams.
Holy shit.
Dude, this is ridiculous. But when I see Carson Wentz in there, where I see him sliding to, even in a 16-team league, shocks me. So, Nick, do you think that Carson Wentz is underrated? And if so, do you think he has league-winning upside?
I'm going to start with the latter and say I don't think he has league-winning upside, because that's such a rare thing coming from the quarterback position. Like the median quarterback in fantasy is just not separating themselves from, you know, the quarterback 8 and the quarterback 18. You know, nominal fucking difference between the points per game kind of stuff. Like very, very rarely do we have league winning quarterbacks, right? We have like Lamar last year, maybe Patrick Mahomes 2 years ago, but it's usually not an every year thing. So with Carson Wentz, I mean, you need to have some kind of elite rushing ability or some kind of unbelievable passing upside. And it's not that I don't think Wentz has the talent, but like he's not surrounded by enough players right now to make that happen. So with Wentz, I think, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not a guy I'm fading. He's not a guy I'm necessarily targeting. I don't have like a strong take on him. I think he's definitely risky. I think the red flags are certainly there. They haven't built a good wide receiver group for him. Like long term, like we all love the Rager pick, but behind him, what are we expecting? Like 26 games between fucking Jackson and Jeffrey this year, and there's nothing else behind him. There's the tight ends. Ertz is getting a little older. Miles Sanders is fun, but you know, real wide receiver groups, like there's so many teams that have better wide receivers. So I think most middle of the pack quarterbacks are as good as their weapons groups around them and their rushing upside when it comes to fantasy. So league winning upside, definitely don't think we have it with Wentz. Can he be, you know, would it surprise me if he snuck in there as like quarterback 5 this year in fantasy? Absolutely not. I don't think anyone could argue the point. But I think between like, you know, the injury history that he has, them drafting Jalen Hurts, the lack of true weaponry on the outside to connect on deep passes, the ones that really rack up the fantasy points, it's hard for me to buy in given the risk an early pick, especially in like dynasty superflex startups. I think I'd probably rather fade him in the where are you seeing him go in those 16-team leagues? Like probably end of second round?
I mean, I've seen him sort of in like the middle or early part of the third, which was a shock to me because this is super flex. So he's truly been faded. And I think for a lot of reasons, I think that there's questions about what Philly's doing with that offense. I mean, exactly like you said, the one advantage to Carson Wentz is he's young for Dynasty, right? He's 27 years old. Yeah. And he was top 7 in pass attempts per game last year. So he's throwing the ball. That's the two things that matter, unless you're doing like -6 for interceptions, and then you're fucked. But that's one of the reasons that he continues to stay on the top. But this is a team that looks like they want to run that 2 tight end personnel oftentimes. They've got Jalen Reagor, which we hope is a smash at the NFL level. I thought Justin Jefferson was going to get selected there. I was honestly shocked that Reagor went that high. Mm-hmm. I mean, I thought they were going to look slot too, and get a guy that he can, you know, dump off right over the middle and rack up 8 catches, 10 catches, 9 catches, game over game. The Aguilar thing just never worked out, right? We thought that, hey, this is going to be sort of that solution to Nelson Aguilar. This is what they tried to do originally. And Deshaun Jackson is fucking old as dirt.
Dude, it would have been beautiful if D-Jax could have stayed on the field last year, man. That week 1 game was absolutely... It was fucking electric, man. And maybe they hope to replicate that with Rager and Wentz, man. Who knows? Like, if that can be the case, then yeah. I mean, Rager's just not going to move the needle for Wentz in year 1, at least. Like, what best case scenario? He's racking up like 800 receiving yards this year, 900 as a rookie, right? I think that's probably really reasonable. So, like, long term, and by the time the point is, by the time Rager actually does move the needle, I think Wentz has a lot of long term things working against him, between injuries, between Hurts, between the tight Ertz getting. Not Hurts, but Ertz getting older, the tight end. I don't know. I just think the way they're building around Wentz kind of makes me question his longevity here.
Right.
I just started putting together my redraft rankings, and I have Wentz slotted in as QB10, and I think that kind of QB5 ceiling that Nick kind of hit on is certainly in his range of outcomes. But it goes back to what Nate was saying. Like I added this question because I wanted to get your guys' take on it, because every time I log on for the past week and a half, 2 weeks, I think there's just a storm of tweets about how Wentz is the key to this fantasy season, and if he's healthy, and if he's this, and if he's that. And I'm kind of torn because I found myself liking Jalen Hurts a lot. I had a weird journey with Jalen Hurts where I was kind of completely off of him, and then the combine happened, and I just did this thing where athletes and size adjusted, all this stuff. So Hurts was a dude that, and I think he's got, obviously the numbers in college and says the right things, good kid, all that stuff. Philly takes him relatively early, which I guess we can read into that however we want as far as Wentz's future, or, is the seat hot, wherever the case may be. But then I go back to Wentz, and I like the Rager pick. I think, to your boy's point, they could have went another direction, but I think the Rager pick does make some amount of sense. Love Miles Sanders. The 2 tight end sets make a ton of sense. So the pieces are certainly there. So the more I look at Wentz, the more I kind of say, man, 10 might be a little bit low, but then I kind of find myself talking back out of him. He's a player that I have not, we're still a little bit early in the summer here, early in the process, so I haven't kind of got a firm grasp on it yet, but man, I've seen takes all over the place. And I think my take right now is just like Nick says, I think he's probably in that 10 to 12 range, but certainly has like QB 4, 5, 6 kind of upside.
He's a guy you diversify with. Yeah, he's a guy you don't fade completely. He's a guy you don't go all in on, because there are risks and there are rewards. If you're playing in fucking 6 Superflex leagues this year, draft him in 1, draft him in 2, and enjoy it if he hits, and if he doesn't hit, then you're not killed everywhere. So I don't think there needs to be like a hot take on every guy, and Wentz is certainly a guy with a huge range of outcomes, and when you have those types of guys, you shouldn't go all in on them.
So, oh boy. Let's rotate to the running back position for a second, because Ryan put a great question on here. So we're entering 2020. We're coming off of one of the most insane volume seasons we've ever seen from a running back. So Christian McCaffrey, there's noise out there. Are you fading him as the number 1 running back in fantasy football? Is that a ridiculous notion?
Are there people doing that? Is that a thing?
So this was kind of the preface around the question was,
I think we got too much time in the fucking off season, man.
So I think that certainly plays a role in a lot of this. But what I've seen a lot of, and I think we have this conversation every year, every other year, but it's like, how many times do we see the number 1 back, the number 1 option, go back to back? Mm-hmm. That hasn't happened since whatever player it was. Yeah, was it Tomlinson? I don't know. Priest Holmes? I don't know. So it goes back quite a while. So that's kind of the notion with a guy like McCaffrey, who, again, we are witnessing our generation's Marshall Faulk. This generation's what he does on a weekly basis is stupid. You know what I mean? So and that's kind of the basis of the question. It's super simple. Like, are you all in, or is there an argument, I guess, for a player that isn't?
Like, if you're going to be like C-Mac or the field, obviously the field has a chance of doing it. The smart play would be on C-Mac. I mean, you look at the situation. I love Joe Brady coming into Carolina. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that Carolina let go of everyone they had on defense. They are going to need to catch up. What better quarterback to pair with a check down guy than Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey? It's like, they keep coming out and say they want to lighten the workload with Christian. It's like the opposite of what they're doing to your boy Josh Jacobs out in Oakland, where they're like, yeah, we want him to take everything they're saying, they're acting the opposite way. And with Christian McCaffrey, it's the inverse of that. Everything they're saying about how they want to lighten the workload, and then they don't add any line of scrimmage receivers. They don't add any run. I actually thought Carolina was going to be a sneaky team to take a guy like a Zach Moss or an A.J. Dillon earlier on in the draft to pair with McCaffrey as a thumper. That case, I would would think about it. But like, man, C-Mac is just in such a good spot to even if you told me that C-Mac wasn't going to repeat as the RB1 and he was going to be like the RB3, I'm probably still going to take him as the RB1, knowing that his floor is that high. I mean, Vegas has him at like 2,050 total yards as the over-under, 15.5 touchdowns. I don't know. Like, I get the whole point that he had like 400 touches. He's going to regress, but like, give me all the fucking regression because it's still going to be a ridiculously high statistical season for him.
Let me hit you with a number real quick because this is fucking shocking. Do you know how many points Christian McCaffrey would have had to have given up last year to have finished as the running back 2? Just take a guess.
I want to say he was like 4 or 5 points ahead in points per game, so maybe between the 60 and 70 mark.
In PPR leagues in 2019.
PPR way higher.
Yeah. So in PPR,
yeah, I was thinking half.
He finished 156 points ahead of Aaron Jones. So cue in whatever regression you want.
It's still so comfy.
But that dude smashed the second highest score in fantasy this year by 156, and he smashed Saquon Barkley, who played 16 games last year, by about 90.
It's ridiculous.
And that was a great season. So
the regression argument, I think, all around needs to be like taken down for fantasy because it's pointless for the most of the time. Regression is brought up. It's pointless because it's not put into context. Like, yes, Aaron Jones is going to regress from 16 rushing touchdowns, but if he scores 13, even if he scores 10, he's going to be a perfectly fine RB1. And if you're going to take into effect only regression from the rushing touchdown standpoint, you also need to do some kind of calculations for regression on receptions. Is it going to be positive or negative? Total yards, rushing yards, receiving. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just take one piece of context and not look at every piece of the puzzle in order to get it right. And we only like to take the most polarizing parts of people's statistics and look at regression that way, but things change year over year. And I just think like the situation is just fucking plain for Christian McCaffrey. Love Joe Brady coming in, love Teddy Bridgewater coming in as an actual, solid piece of this offense that's going to hopefully make them run a little bit better. And again, going back to the defense, they're going to need to score points and catch up a lot, which is just perfect for a guy like C-Mac who's going to catch another 100-plus passes.
I mean, okay, so, and Ryan has this question in here too. If not Christian McCaffrey, who's the next closest running back this year that could finish as the running back 1?
I'll probably take the easy out here and say Saquon. I think that they've been doing a really good job of building their offensive line. I think they're going to have like a very respectable unit going into the year. I think that's been a problem for them. Daniel Jones just needs to take a little bit of a step up in terms of just like keeping the defense a little bit honest, and the holes are going to be there for Saquon Barkley, and he's a guy that you can give him 50 less rushing attempts than C-Mac, and he can catch him in the rushing yardage total because he could break off 60, 70-yard touchdown run on any given carry. Not that C-Mac can't do that, but I feel like Saquon's probably a little bit more equipped to do so, despite what C-Mac did last year. The one problem I really do have with Saquon in the passing game is that when you have a guy like Daniel Jones who is mobile, you tend to get a lot less targets to the running back position because it's just like pure athletic, first nature. Like if you're a quarterback who's been athletic your entire life, your first, instinct is to say like, fuck it, I'm going to tuck the ball. I'm going to run rather than looking at the quickest guy to dump the ball off to. I'm just going to tuck my head, run up the middle or run to the outside or whatever. And that adds up over the course of 16 games, 1 target a game, 2 targets a game. It's the difference between C-Mac catching 100 passes and Saquon catching 85, 80, 75. I think that could be the difference there.
And, it's a good point because you look at his rookie year playing with Eli Manning, and he averaged 2 full targets per game more than his first year with Daniel Jones. So pretty interesting way to look at that. But that may be the reality of it. But we know that target share is king. So the only player that's going to even come close to Christian McCaffrey is probably going to be a guy that sees 70-plus targets. And Saquon certainly falls into that classification. I mean, Zeke Elliott gets the rushing workload.
I was going to say, how far off do you think Zeke is? Because Zeke certainly, I feel like we say this every year, Zeke has like that 18 rushing touchdown upside in his range of outcomes. But like, is it time to pass that torch? Like with Julio, it's like, oh, he's got that 15-year touchdown coming. Is that just not going to happen with Zeke? Or do you think, because if he does do that, if he throws up 18 rushing touchdowns, like he could certainly be right there with C-Mac, right?
I mean, Ezekiel Elliott finished last year with 12, and he was the RB3 overall in PPR. Again, I'm doing PPR scoring here. But, I think I'm all in on him. I mean, he was one of a few running backs that went over 300 carries last year. When you look at the top 10, there was only 2 guys that did. Of course, Nick Chubb was just outside of that by 2. But it's pretty incredible when you look at the volume that Ezekiel Elliott gets. My fear, and I've talked about this on shows before, is with him and Dalvin Cook in the future. We enter 2021. These guys are both running backs. Ezekiel Elliott has a massive contract, so they have a lot of reason to make sure that he stays healthy to make it to the end. They made these investments in this team. They want to make it to the playoffs. They want to go deep. I don't think they can afford to lose Ezekiel Elliott. We like Tony Pollard. I think Pollard sees more work. I think you see in a 17-game season, a guy like Ezekiel Elliott gets scaled back. The same way that I'm concerned about Dalvin Cook's durability issues and the quality of Alexander Mattison behind him. I think their concern as well is, hey, Dalvin Cook is great, but we're concerned that he's not going to make it to the end of the season if we keep overloading him with volume. So those are the two guys to me that in the future I see getting scaled back more than anyone else. So that would be a concern of mine with a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, I guess.
Yeah, I asked this question because I was curious if you guys were going to say the player that I was thinking of as far as if not C-Mac, then who. I would love to get your boys' take on Alvin Kamara, because this is a player that I myself I think I'm super high on. It goes back to the Leonard Fournette class and kind of where I had Kamara ranked in comparison to Fournette and all that. So a player that, again, my bias for Fournette's one thing, my bias for Kamara certainly another. This is a player that had started off the career back-to-back 100 target seasons, was 3 targets shy last year. Only played two games shy of a 16-game season. And the narrative the headline that came out a week or 2 or 3 ago, whatever it was, is that, Kamara's leg was 75%. He wasn't healthy. So I connect all the dots. We got an aging Drew Brees who is, in the twilight of his career here, could perhaps rely a little more heavily on a weapon like Kamara. Obviously, he's got Mike Thomas, who is a target vacuum. But if I look at a player just straight talent-wise, and Nate, again, has emphasized the importance of targets, to me, Kamara, if he's healthy, seems to be like that guy that I think he's gotten some buzz, but perhaps not the buzz that maybe I think he deserves, or kind of where I might have him myself. And again, my biases are certainly out there. So taking it away from me, Nick, Nate, is Kamara a player that could be mentioned in that that top one or two finish?
I wouldn't put him in the 1. I think if you wanted to take him at 2, I don't think I'd have a reasonable argument to go against you. I think, like you said, with the high ankle sprain last year, I'm totally bought into the fact that that's what changed it. And I've seen people tweet this out, but I did a lot of research because I've been doing my running back rankings videos over the last month or so. Mm-hmm. And when I started to dive into Kamara, I wanted to make sure I did this right because he was so polarizing for the first 2 years. Last year, obviously, he had the dip. But, you look at the efficiency numbers and what he was doing prior to the high ankle sprain, he was the Alvin Kamara that we expected. He was one of, if not the most elusive back in the entire NFL. Gets hurt, and then that number drops so far. That number drops to Leonard Fournette type elusive levels. And once he,
I love the little jabs, man. I just keep dropping them off the backboard for you, man. It's too easy.
I'm fucking slamming them down. I just need to make sure Nate's not sleeping over there. It's late over here on the East Coast. So Kamara, I'm totally in with it. I just what we saw from Kamara those first 4 games when Ingram was out a couple years back. He would need. It's clear that the Saints don't ever want to give him that workload over an elongated period, and that's what he would need in order to match a guy like Christian McCaffrey. So I don't ever see the ceiling getting there, but I do see the RB2 floor is completely in his range of outcomes if you're trying to project him forward. So I'm not mad about an RB2 spot for Kamara.
I think he's exactly right, man. I mean, you look at last year, or 2018, he finished as the RB4 overall in PPR leagues. He only played 15 games. He was over 100 targets. I mean, only 8 more targets than we saw from him this year, and about 20 more rush attempts, but we all know the difference, right? It was touchdowns. That was the big difference for Alvin Kamara. This has been my argument with Leonard Fournette, because this is the most unpredictable statistic in fantasy football. How many touchdowns you can have year over year? Because we all believe that New Orleans Saints are going to score infinite touchdowns all the time. They feel like, to me, they feel like Kansas City in a way. Like Drew Brees is fucking unstoppable. They're hyper efficient. But I think the real issue when it comes down to it in fantasy football, and it's the same thing that I'd make the argument with Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler had the most incredible, efficient fantasy football season last year. I think he had, 11 total touchdowns. Still didn't finish inside the top 3. 108 targets. The rushing attempts weren't necessarily there, and that might be the overall difference. But with Kamara, he would honestly need to get over 200 rush attempts. I mean, that would have to happen for him to get there. Or the touchdowns have to go way back up. But again, even when the touchdowns were at an absolute peak, he wasn't inside the top 3. So I think for him to ever get into the number 1 argument, he's probably going to need to see a lot more rush attempts. And I just don't know if we're ever going to see Kamara, especially as the way that we've seen him run, a physical runner, a guy that they're trying to get into space. And if Drew Brees eventually phases out of New Orleans, what happens then? I mean, we've seen running backs with Jameis Winston. I mean, he's certainly not going to make defenses freeze in their place like Drew Brees does. So I don't even know what the future looks like.
Well, with Kamara on that point, if Drew Brees was out of there, you look at like Kamara, I look at Kamara and Eckler, and I look at their situations very similarly because it's clear that both of their offenses have predicated themselves on having these veteran quarterbacks who they want to stay. They know they have a very short window, right? They want these guys to stay on the field. They want them to not get hit. They've tried to build up the offensive lines at least. Their game plan is to get the ball out quickly, right? It's a lot of screens to the running backs. It's a lot of short, quick hitting plays to Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, whatever it is. We've seen Kamara, we've seen Eckler line up out wide or in the slot, like at a very, very high percentage of their routes. So I wouldn't assume that would change. Like even if we have a new quarterback in New Orleans and assuming Kamara is still there, he's still going to be lining up outside of the backfield on like 35% of his routes, I think. So I think the passing game continues to stay. The overall offense, like the touchdown upside, obviously plummets a little bit as the offensive efficiency kind of also takes a backseat with Brees out of there. But I think they have such a good offensive foundation with Sean Payton in that scheme that they know what to do with Kamara. I don't know if any team has used a player as perfectly as the Saints have used Alvin Kamara, since he's entered the league, to be honest.
Yeah.
This is a player that we haven't talked about yet, but many analysts, Evan Silva is certainly on the forefront of this, are beating the drum for Miles Sanders, that he could be a top 10 running back this year, that he should be a guy everybody is all in on in Dynasty. But we continue to hear little bits and pieces about the Eagles maybe bringing in another running back, about competition, and there's questions about will he ever see the full workload. Nick, where are you at on Miles Sanders? Are you in on this hype?
Fuck yeah. If he's beating the drum, I want in on the band, baby. I'm in on Miles Sanders as well. I think all of the people that don't like Sanders are just like nitpicking these really small factors that I don't think are going to affect Sanders over the long term. I'll be the first to admit I do love Sanders. He's like my RB7, I think, in redraft right now. If they were to go out and sign a veteran running back, I will pull him back because that veteran running back will get some carries out of Miles Sanders' workload. But I think like the whole running back by committee thing is fine. Like we've seen guys prosper. Guys that have the athletic profile of a Miles Sanders can prosper with limited volume. And the volume is not even going to be that limited. You're still going to see 17 to 18 touches out of Sanders. And like we look at like Boston Scott over the end of the year last year, we're like, oh, Boston Scott's going to catch a ton of passes. Like even while Scott had his like mini breakout at the end of the year when he was getting 5 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, Sanders was matching him basically target for target. So while Scott was getting those targets, Sanders was also getting the target. So it's not like it took away from his volume. And, we know over the last half of the year, Sanders was absolutely the guy, and they just needed to give him the keys. We see that with so many rookie running backs, man. They come in, and people who expect rookie running backs to come in and just be the workhorse out of the gate are fooling themselves, man. This is what we see year in and year out. Going into the summer, you have to know that it's going to take a month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks for that rookie running back to take over. We saw it with David Montgomery and Mike Davis. We see it with Miles Sanders. It was only a matter of time before Miles Sanders got in. I know it took an injury, but this is a drum that we've seen beat year over year over year. A lot of coaches are hesitant to put the rookie out there, and it makes sense. I mean, you can't always just look at a number and analytic thing. You do have to think about it from a football standpoint. The same way with like Oakland, they're like, we don't want to put Josh Jacobs out there having to learn all the blocking schemes, having to learn all the routes run, et cetera, et cetera. We want him to do what he does best. And then once he's really comfortable on the ground, we'll add in this and then this, and before we know it, he'll be the featured back. So I think there's a little bit of realism that needs to be added in when it comes to Miles Sanders, and that will come to fruition this year as the lead back. So I'm all in on Sanders. If they do add a vet, I'll pull back a little bit in a redraft, but I'm not going to be fucking fading him though.
Yeah. I think dynasty wise, man, he has to keep inching up your rankings wherever he is. Keep inching him up for redraft. I love the RB7 ish call. I think that's probably what he'll end up with for me as well. Jordan Howard, obviously Miami. Darren Sproles gone. Clement's a free agent, so it's Sanders and Boston and smallish Boston Scott now as a change of pace runner. They've been linked to Carlos Hyde, and Carlos Hyde, man, he was a player that just a guy in every sense of the word. But as we saw last year, can do enough to just kind of stymie and kind of, as Nick was kind of alluding to, just do enough to take away from the RB1. Devonta Freeman doesn't necessarily scare me as much. He's also been linked to Philadelphia.
I would love, as a Falcons fan, if they put Freeman in Philly, I'm moving Sanders up my ranking.
I'm not there. It is, man. That's what it is. It's just
kidding.
the injury history is legit. I mean, Freeman had his shine and he looked good, but he just obviously broke down, which is unfortunate for him. But so Freeman doesn't scare me. But man, even with all the noise, and it goes back to our conversation about Wentz. I'm kind of so wishy-washy about Wentz, but at the same time, I can't get off of Miles Sanders. So if I love Sanders as much as I do, I obviously have to kind of believe in Wentz and his ability to kind of orchestrate things. So Sanders just super, super, well-rounded, an excellent receiver. I think he's a perfect, to go super cliche, like a perfect back for today's game. The arrows to me are just screaming up for Miles Sanders in both dynasty and redraft. NATO, I imagine you are in lockstep with that, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, and to Nick's point, we talk about potential timeshare. Look, Alvin Kamara has finished inside the top 10 2 years in a row while playing alongside Mark Ingram and Latavius Murray. I mean, he's never had the future workload, and he continues to be a massive part of that game. And again, a big part of that is the passing game. We saw Miles Sanders just last year finish with 63 targets on a 53.7, number 27 at the position snap share. So we expect that to rise. So Nick's rank is probably pretty goddamn close if we think that Miles Sanders creeps into that 80 target range, because that could be right about where you need him to be to finish well inside the top 10. So I love Miles Sanders as well. All right, Nick, we're going to try and go ahead. You got something?
I did want to add one more thing because you mentioned like how he's a perfect fit for today's game. Yeah. And I mean, you look at the top 12 running backs from last year, and they're not all workhorses. Like I would say half of them probably saw like 275 touches or fewer, right? And like you don't need Miles Sanders to be the RB1 or 2 to return value on where you're going to be able to get him in a redraft this year. So looking at like, I think 18 touches a game is a probably reasonable, 17, 18, that's going to end up in that 270 to 290 range. And plenty of running backs finish as RB1s with that touch range. And he's going to be one of them that gets a ton of passes, and that's what gets you in there. So I think Sanders, like, I don't know if I could reasonably say, as much as I love him, that like I'm expecting him to get 300 touches. If you told me Miles Sanders was getting 280 this year, I'd still be drafting him around the same spot probably.
Yeah, Adam Kaplan went on the Inside the Birds podcast. This is one of the latest blurbs here over at Roto World. Kaplan was saying that 15 to 18 range as well. So I think Nick's spot on with that. And again, that's really all someone like Sanders needs. I mean, you go back and watch him last year, the things that they were doing with him, throw him in the slot, outside, whatever. He's running down the field. His hands are there. So again, it goes back to what Nate was saying about the targets and ability as a receiver, just how that pads the floor and just raises the ceiling. I mean, Sanders again fits that role to a T.
It really does, man. Nick, we haven't talked about too many rookies on this episode other than the Taylor Edwards conversation, but do you have a standout year one at wide receiver? Is there anybody that you're a big fan of?
Yeah, I mean, this is not very outgoing, but I think CeeDee Lamb is going to far outproduce any expectations people have for him in redraft. I'm saying I think he comes in there and immediately I don't know if I want to say overtakes Gallup in the wide receiver 2 role, but like by week 8, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the wide receiver 2. I wouldn't be surprised if he flirts with 900 to 1,000 receiving yards, out of the gate. If he gets that slot role, which I think he's definitely going to secure, where we saw Randall. I mean, they're one of the teams that gives up the top 3 in targets, I want to say, for this upcoming year, right? It's like the Falcons, the Cowboys. They have like 15 targets a game up for grabs. Put CeeDee Lamb into Randall Cobb's slot last year where he racked up 950 total yards from scrimmage. CeeDee Lamb, like Randall Cobb is basically incapable of moving after the catch at this point in his career, right? Where CeeDee Lamb that's his calling card, right? He's a yak monster. So give him like somewhere near the same volume that Cobb got. Get Witten off the field now. Like I think people are like infatuated with this idea of, Matt Kelly's cliche alert of too many mouths to feed, but like that could be a good problem when you're attached to a good quarterback. Sometimes good quarterbacks just find good players, and CeeDee Lamb is certainly that.
NATO, man, I got nothing hot takey or of note. I mean, we talked about Jalen Reagor's spot. I really enjoy the CeeDee Lamb call. Obviously, it's a little bittersweet knowing that the Raiders passed on him. I guess my hot take, if I can talk about the Raiders for a second, is Henry Ruggs. I'd love to get you guys' thoughts about Henry Ruggs. I ran back and looked at all the John Gruden's wide receiver 1 numbers, and the dude obviously has a history of funneling targets to his his wide receiver one. Now, obviously, Henry Ruggs doesn't profile like a Tim Brown or some of the players that he had in Tampa Bay when John Gruden was coaching down there. He's a bit smaller, but obviously has the blazing speed, the game-breaking speed. But I think, I guess it is kind of a hot take. I went out on a limb and I said, I think Ruggs has a pretty comfortable 90 to 100 target floor as a rookie. John Gruden's been looking for his one. The narrative was that obviously with Antonio Brown on board, they were sculpting the offense around him. Certainly that didn't come to fruition. He joined Oakland, shipped Amari Cooper out, so he's never had a one. Here he goes. He makes Henry Ruggs 12 overall. He makes him his wide receiver one. I think he's going to get just a plethora of targets, boys. And again, I guess that's maybe a hot take given what his profile looks like, again, a bit smaller. But am I completely off my rocker to suggest that Ruggs kind of outpaces any kind of expectations?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that again, I think Oakland would look pretty foolish if they didn't unleash a little bit of Henry Ruggs in year one. I mean, it felt like Josh Jacobs was really tamed from what the expectation was coming out of college going into his role in the NFL. And again, to your point, when you look at that wide receiver one target share over the years, it's clearly opportunity up for grabs. I just think that it's interesting that they added so much competition all in one draft.
Yeah.
I mean, you had Bowden, you had Bryan Edwards, who again, many of us don't even know what he could be. I mean, the Breakout Finder loves him. The app absolutely loves Bryan Edwards, loved him pre-draft, loves him post-draft. Landed in Oakland. And, the too many mouths to feed cliche is certainly an interesting one. But when you talk about Oakland, that feels like a place where I would be more concerned about how many mouths there are to feed there versus when we're talking about Dallas. And I'm with Nick.
Sure.
CeeDee Lamb is obviously the guy. Like, we've even had conversations about he could legitimately overtake Amari Cooper in this offense. Like, that's not inconceivable.
Yeah.
I mean, he's that good. And Amari Cooper does have a contract out in 2 years. So potentially, with the cap space issues that they're facing now and what the future is, maybe Amari's not in Dallas in 2 years and this is CeeDee Lamb's place because they never expected CeeDee Lamb to fall to them anyways, right? I mean, Jerry Jones talked about that. So I like Henry Ruggs. I think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's being faded incredibly heavily by the fantasy football industry. I see that guy fall so far in drafts all the time.
Yeah.
And if he even is like a smidge of the Tyreek Hill ability, which people have sort of compared him to, then a lot of us are going to be throwing our fucking hands up like, wow, that was a miss, all along when maybe it was obvious.
I think I have a few things I think to add on that. I feel like Amari Cooper, that whole situation, he seems like the easiest sell candidate in dynasty leagues right now. Like, if you can still get like Amari Cooper value for him, for people that think he's going to be, that high wide receiver one, you have to sell him right now because by the time CD takes over and becomes that talent there, Amari's going to be over that age apex. I think you got to get rid of him. The other actually like semi-hot take I have that I've actually heard around the industry a little bit is I do think Justin Jefferson is going to struggle out in Minnesota. I don't like the offense that they're putting him in because they're going so too tight end heavy. They want to be very run heavy. And, people want to use like the stats and shit, but he doesn't separate on the outside like he does in the slot, man. And if he's not playing out of the slot, like if they, for whatever reason, are just like, we want to continue to play Adam Thielen in the slot and Jefferson's on the outside, he's going to struggle to gain separation, I think, against real NFL cornerbacks. So I have a little hesitation when it comes to Justin Jefferson as opposed to a lot of people that really, really like him from his profile and his production, which can't really be argued. But like, I do think there are some red flags there. With Ruggs, I think like a lot of the hesitation on a guy like Ruggs is from people not understanding how they're going to use him, though. He's like he's a really good around the line of scrimmage. Like, get him the ball. Like, don't use the speed to try to connect downfield. Use the speed connecting at the line of scrimmage and let him make plays. And John Gruden's been very, very good at dictating how his wide receiver ones operate. Like he's a guy that produces really good fantasy wide receiver ones when he's got somebody to work with. And I think Ruggs fits the style well. So I think the fade on Ruggs is getting a little bit ignorant to this point because his ceiling is absolutely there if they could use him as more of a line of scrimmage possession receiver like he's not Deshaun Jackson. He's not, I don't even think he's like the Tyreek Hill guy, even though Tyreek Hill has proven to be a little bit more possession than just a one-trick pony down the field. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if Ruggs doesn't really even get that many targets, down the field 30 yards. But if they can use him screens on slants, like he'll definitely do his work, man.
I love that call, and that's kind of why I was, and I certainly understand people that are hesitant because of Derek Carr and his resume and the up and like I totally get that, and I am of course a fan of the team, but I have no problem speaking out against the quarterback play. I have several thoughts literally on my timeline about it, but again, I think this is the year where it's now or never for the quarterback, and that's neither here nor there right now. But I will say with Ruggs specifically. And that's why I was so high on Jerry Jeudy and his fit in Oakland, just given what he does off the line of scrimmage, given what he does with his feet in space, able to create for himself after the catch. Again, Lamb was a yak monster, just given his build, his size, his strength. But Jeudy got it done for other reasons, the quickness and stuff, and that's Ruggs' game as well. So they want to use him in those short, intermediate levels of the field. Certainly the speed is there to take the top off the defense, but I have to imagine he gets mixed up, off the line of scrimmage, as Nick said, and he just gets peppered. I just see him getting peppered with targets. John Gruden wants to make good on that super early investment. This dude stuck his neck out, made him the first wide receiver off the board in a historically talented, deep class. I can't imagine Gruden drafts a guy that high just to kind of, sit him back or even ease him into things as early as his rookie year. So I'm super, super high on Ruggs. All my fandom aside, I never let that nonsense play into this stuff. But I don't understand the Ruggs fade to this extreme. I understand the Derek Carr questions and shit like that, but again, to this extreme, just seems like you said, it just seems kind of ignorant. So
that whole division is going to be like really fun to watch unfold over the next few years, because the team, like Oakland and Denver and whatever, they're just seeing Kansas City. And they're like, fuck, how do we match that explosion?
Got a boat race every Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, we're just going to draft the most high-powered, explosive players on our offense and hope that it works out. But what they're clearly missing is that they don't have Patrick Mahomes on their team. So
it kind of makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. But it's clear, it's clear what those teams, their approaches were to move forward as NFL franchises. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really fun division to kind of watch over the next few years.
Well, I'll tell you what the Denver Broncos are going to do, Nick. I'll tell you right now what they're going to do. They're building a veteran destination at the trade deadline. Aaron Rodgers goes to Denver. Mark my words, right there. It's going down.
I love that.
That's happening.
I love that.
Hell yeah. That's happening. All right, so let's get to a patron question here. I can only get to one of these. Nick is overextended. He's falling asleep over there, but his takes are still fire, so it's impressive. This is from our guy, second-round pick. He says, I've been hearing a lot of hype lately over Allen Lazard. Given the drama surrounding Aaron Rodgers, who's going to Denver, it's clear he will not be the quarterback in the near future for the Packers. Should you even bother rostering Lazard at all, or should you look more heavily into the running back like A.J. Dillon instead, Nick?
I think there's a few parts to break down there. I mean, obviously you're not able to it's not tick for tack. Like, you're not being able to choose between one or the other. Dillon's second-round rookie pick, and Lazard is someone that you might get off the wire, or trade for a fourth or third round or whatever. Lazard, I think like what we need to steer away from is the question of who is the wide receiver 2 in Green Bay to does it fucking matter? Because at this point, like, we're not in 2014, 2015, 2016 where it's like Aaron Rodgers is feeding multiple people besides Devontae Adams. Like, their game plan is clearly to get the ball into their running backs' hands, right? Whether it's Jones, whether it's through receptions, it doesn't really matter. I don't know. Like, Lazard, if I'm going to choose one guy, it's Lazard, but there are going to be a lot of people that hype him up as like a major breakout this year. He had 3 good games last year. They were against I think 2 of them were against Detroit, one of them against New York Giants, who are both bottom 5 passing defenses in the league. So it's like, I don't know how much you really want to hinge your hat on that. Otherwise, he was wildly inconsistent. The franchise does love him, and I think that gives a little bit of leeway with a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who, like, if he doesn't like you, you're not getting targets over there. So I'm not a guy that's about to dive in and go all in on Allen Lazard. Again, the two, their value is very different, so you can't really just choose A.J. Dillon or Lazard. If I could choose one for the future, I'm taking Dillon for my dynasty team.
We all remember Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Geronimo Allison beginning of 2019, right? Like, everybody
fun argument
was
fucking
hyped on these guys. You got
to
the number 2 in an Aaron Rodgers offense. But, man, you said it exactly right. This ain't Jordy and fucking Devontae Adams anymore. Those days are done. The few years where Aaron Rodgers had 2 top 15 wide receivers, and I bring this stat up all the time, it's borderline impossible for one quarterback to prop up 2 guys inside the top 15. Typically, you might get one in the top 10 and the other one floats at 16 or 20. We saw it this year with Gallup and Cooper. But You don't see it often, and there are some times where two guys end up in the top 10. We saw Diggs and Thielen in there a couple years ago. We saw Antonio Brown and Juju Smith in there a couple years ago, but it doesn't happen often. So what the fuck is the value of this guy anyways? And the MVS flared out big time. Flared the fuck out because his profile was shit. People should have known it from the start. Allen Lazard is an undrafted free agent. And you already laid out the case. Why the fuck would he make it? And if anything, Aaron Jones is going to see more targets than he saw last year, especially with AJ
honestly, like they re-signed Lazard to a 1-year, $600,000 contract. That's far from a lock to even make the team, if we're being honest here. I know he showed well down the stretch, but that's like you better go out and fucking ball this summer, or you're not a lock for the 53, man. They gave Devin Funchess like 5 times the amount of money for a 1-year deal. You know,
let's name some. Jake Kumaro. Where the fuck did he go? He's on the side of a milk carton. Jeff Janis, where the fuck did he go? He's on the side of a milk carton. All these guys, MVS, Geronimo Allison, pick a name. If it isn't Devontae Adams, they're not shit at this point in his career. But someday when it's Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant, you're going to want him again. That's when they're going to rise to the top, Nick. So
fair.
That's the deal. Don't get Allen Lazard. Don't bother taking him. You only want Devontae Adams. Nick, man, do you have anything that you want to plug? I know you got a Patreon. I know you have a YouTube. You got a lot of cool stuff.
Lay it all the line, buddy.
All of it.
I first want to say that I love the music that you guys choose for the show. Like the intro and the outro music is absolutely fucking flames, infinite flame emojis. Yes. So I want to give you guys respect on that.
It's all NATO.
Yeah, in terms of you guys can just find me on YouTube. It's just my name, Nick Ercolano, ERCOLANO, and then from there you can creep around and probably find me other places.
Very cool. Good, man. Well, yeah, dude, you're a good follow. I apologize for not following you earlier on. Now I got to go dig up all these like hateful Leonard Fournette tweets that you claim to have sent me. I have to go search that shit and see what kind of bugs you were dropping.
Do you know how to use the search function on Twitter well? Serious question, because a lot of people don't know how to use it.
I don't know. This is gonna be like a run back, like an old man.
Very fucking loaded, dude. Yeah, that felt like another old man comment.
No, because it's a lot easier to find tweets like that. You use from, and then you use the semicolon, and then you just put the username. You put like Fournette from Nick_BDG or something like that. Yeah, so you didn't know, right?
I didn't fucking know, man.
I didn't know that either.
You should help me come over and help set up my iPad and my network over at my house.
You paying for flights?
Yeah, sure. You want to come out here? Let's do it.
Yeah, I'll fucking come out here if you're paying for it, man. I'm always down
shoot some content, bro. All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Dude, this is one of my favorite podcasts we've had in a long time.
Oh, sure.
Dude, I was glad to open it up, kind of talking about what you do, man, because, again, I think you're very different from honestly anybody else that we've ever had on this podcast. So it's certainly a unique situation and thing that you've built over there, man. So it's obvious why you're having success, man. So I appreciate you coming on. Hope to get you back on in the future after Leonard Fournette blows the fuck up in 2020. So you can do infinite apology emojis to me. And all right, we'll be back in a couple weeks, guys. We're I think Ryan and I are on a 3 weeks off, 1 week on thing right now. So we will be back in the distant future.
Quality over quantity, baby.